I mean, it's personal drive. I mean, nobody's gonna do all this for you, you know.
Right.
And that's, I think, the problem with a lot of kids these days is they want everything handed to them. They don't realize how much work it goes into being, you know, a band, even of marginal success. How much time and effort it takes, and you just got to get out there and you've got to make phone calls. You got to send emails. You know, that's the only way to do it. And I honestly believe that anybody who has enough drive to do that can be successful at whatever they want. And I think we were actually talking about this the other day. There was some study done that says if you can dedicate 1,000 hours to one thing that you want to be good at.
10,000 hours.
Is it 10,000? Okay.
I mean, 10,000 hours is sort of like supposedly like the tipping point for mastering your craft. Like if you can devote 10,000 hours to it, typically that's like considered the make or break point, whether or not you
just gonna keep sucking, or you're gonna.
Yeah, like I mean, for the most part, you're probably not gonna find yourself doing something for 10,000 hours unless you really want it.
Right.
You know, so I think most studies show that most professionals who excel at their craft, for lack of a better term, typically spend about 10,000 hours working on it.
And that's what a lot of people think, you know, and it's completely false, and it's completely inaccurate, and it's almost insulting to the amount of work that has gone into it, you know. I mean,
maybe in the beginning there were certain things, but I think even then it was like, you know, I don't think anything happened by mistake or by chance. You know, it was always like, you know, okay, we got signed to Relapse really early, and all these other things happened, but it was also like, we're gonna play this show, and we're gonna make friends with these people, and we're gonna play this, you know, play with this band who's on Relapse, so that we know Relapse will be at that show, and you know, it's
gotcha.
You know, there's always a strategy behind it, and you can't always make it happen just by willing it to happen. But you know, I think a lot of bands think like, oh, we're gonna play this show, and there's gonna be a label there, and they're gonna, you know, like the Anvil movie or something, like, you know, like, oh, it's just gonna happen, and you know, as long as we're driven, it's gonna happen. It's like, well, there's more to it than that, but there's obviously a strategy in being able to like see patterns and talk to other bands and see how they did it, what works and what doesn't, and where you want to be. I think there's enough room at the bottom. You know, like, you know, not to get into like a nanotechnology type thing, but like you can. I don't know. There's.
Well, I mean, I think
as long as you were never overvalued. You know, I think a lot of bands who are like huge can't understand when things get like, you know, all of a sudden like now their fan base is half of what it was, but like, you know, I think that we always kind of had the ethic of like we never relied on making money with royalties. We never relied on all these other things that I think a lot of other bands did, you know, huge signing bonuses and something. It's like that's totally foreign to us. So when we tour and make money doing what we usually do, yeah, it's weird when your attendance is slightly altered, but when you consider that everybody's taking a hit, it's, for a band like us, I don't think it's as drastic as some other industries.
I mean, and bringing it back to like the amount of bands that there are today, you know, I sort of see it as natural selection. Like if you're a band, well, I mean, if you're in a band and you're too pussy to go out there and play a show because you're afraid you're not gonna, you know, make money, and you're gonna have to eat a can of tuna fish every day for your meal, you know, that's fine. You know, that's one more band that we don't have to deal with.
Sooner or later, some dude's gonna be like, oh, you know, we can't afford to take a bus when we're back in a van, or like, well, then I'm just gonna go back to my office job and like get married, you know. And
I mean, I honestly don't think that, you know, Black Flag had very much money when they were doing it, but they did it, and they did it hard, and they paved the way for bands like us, you know, to be able to do what we do, you know. So, I mean, yeah, the economy, it's, you want to go back? You know, the economy's bad for everybody, but there's always going to be, you know, a number of people who are willing to stick it out, and, you know, that's where a lot of the greatest art comes from, you know, and a lot of the greatest music comes from is when people just put everything that they have in it, no matter what. And, you know,
some people have different priorities, and I felt like I just had this conversation with my girlfriend last night where, you know, it's frustrating sometimes to see, like, you know, as exciting as it is and as honorable as it is to get, like, accolades from, like, a Metallica or a Nine Inch Nails or a Deftones or all this stuff, it's frustrating to be like, man, but we're, like, not even a quarter of either of those band sizes.
Right.
You know, but but what those kind of compliments do is, you know, it makes it, you know, for lack of a better term, like spiritually rewarding, or like, you know, like I'm rich in spirit and all this experience has been great, even though I don't make, like, I'm not driving a Bentley and I don't even want to, but, you know, all the other rewards are worth it. You know, I don't get to, you know, even though I get to see France and all this stuff, everybody's like, oh, that's great, you get to travel. It's like, but I don't get to see, you know, I get to see the inside of venues, and I get to, like, ping pong between the world's dirtiest toilets, you know. No, I mean, I would like to think that there's a silent majority out there that doesn't really want that, and the only people who are barking for that are just like have nothing else to do, and were probably born, you know, 2 years before that record came out, and like, you know, really are only saying that because there's like a tradition of saying things like that about any band. You know?
Yeah, there's gonna be, you know, I don't care what artist you are. I mean, you could be, you know, you could be the Beatles, and there's gonna be a handful of assholes out there being like, you know, we want Meet the Beatles constantly. You know?
Yeah, or like Metallica fans saying they only want to hear Kill 'Em All tracks. It's like, I'm sure there's some of you out there, and I'm sure there's some honest people out there who really feel that way.
Because even if we did, if we made 20 calculating infinities, there would be just as many people out there saying, I wish they would do something different. You know, so you So the bottom line is, like, you can't make records just to please your fans. You have to make the music that inspires you.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah.
You know, because if you're not happy, you know, you're not going to make great music, and then your fans are going to be even more pissed off. You just got to do what makes you happy, which is what we always have done. You know, I think Fireworks is a great record. Option Paralysis, I think, is going to be an even greater record. You know, we've taken kind of the things that we've done in the past and, you know, amped them up even more. You know, we can continue to expand in both directions, both the chaotic side and the melodic side, which is great, I think. To know, you know, like when we were coming up, you know, there was Relapse Records, there was Hydra Head Records, there was a handful of record labels, and you could just kind of look at a record label and kind of know what you were getting into, you know, for better or for worse.
Like team.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's exactly what it was like. But now, you know, everybody and their mother, you know, I'm going to start a record label. You know, I'm going to record my band in GarageBand, which is great. You know, in one sense, you know, it's kids being creative. You know, they're playing music, which, you know, I can't argue with that. You know, that's great. You know, that was me when I was their age. But at the same time, when there's 500 kids, you know, having delusions of grandeur, thinking they're going to be the next Fall Out Boy, you know, when they're looking at the long term, you know, they're looking at, like, I'm going to be this big star, I'm going to have a reality show, everyone's going to fall in love with me, and, you know, it's all starting with this little band, this little project that I'm doing in GarageBand. When in the reality, maybe one out of every 1,000 bands that sound exactly alike are gonna make it that far, and it's debatable whether or not they should even attain that type of success. You know,
I mean, it's cool to see all this technology happening, all this, like, you know, the GarageBand factor, or like the MySpace factor. It's cool because in some sense, it's like you don't really need a label, and you can just be like, hey, I'm gonna put my band on MySpace. It'll get out there. You know, I don't even need a website anymore. At the same time, it's cool because it levels the playing field, but it also oversaturates things. Like, anybody can put their, you know, have 2 band practices, and now all of a sudden you're on MySpace.